Hey guys, Gun here. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about how to maximize the damage on your character in Path of Exile. And as a comparison I'm going to use my bowrauder and demonstrate all of the things I'm talking about on my bowrauder. My bowrauder is using a physical damage bow, and I'm using a physical damage attack, Rain of Arrows. And as you can see, Rain of Arrows increases my physical damage by a large percentage increase, and it continues to increase the physical damage by quite a large margin per level up. And the way you want to increase your damage is by putting by skilling efficient skill nodes in the skill tree. And what am I talking about here? I'm going to demonstrate it on Iron Grip. Iron Grip is only one skill point in the tree, and it increases my damage by quite a huge margin. The increase to physical damage from strength applies to projectile attacks as well as melee attacks. This means that my strength increases my physical damage with projectile attacks. And since I have quite a lot of strength, 413, my physical damage is increased by about 80%. And 80% physical damage increase for a single point is much more efficient than any other skill point in the tree. Let's say this skill point over here. This one gives 8% increased physical damage with bows, 4% increased physical damage, 4% and stuff like that. This one is only 1 point and increases your physical damage by quite a huge margin. And you want to focus on stuff like this. Points that are much more efficient than other skill points in the tree. And in order to achieve this, you can do several things on all of your characters, but I'm going to show it on my bowrauder. As I already told you, I have a skill point that is rather effective, Iron Grip, and Rain of Arrows also increases physical damage by quite a huge amount, 48%, and together with Iron Grip that amounts to about 120 to 130% physical damage increase, and that's already quite a huge amount, and basically your physical damage is increased by that amount, by that percentage. And then you can do stuff like this, Black Gleam. Black Gleam converts 45% of my physical damage to fire damage. And a lot of people have asked me why I'm using Black Gleam with this build. Because they thought that Black Gleam was a elemental damage quiver. But that's actually not the case, and I'm going to show you exactly why. Black Gleam converts 45% of your damage, of your physical damage, after it has already been increased by all of the physical damage increases. If you have 100 damage physical damage and you increase it by 48% increased physical damage through Rain of Arrows, and you increase it by a lot through Iron Grip, it is increased to something like 200 to 250 physical damage, and then 45% of that damage is converted to fire damage. This means that the physical damage scales once with physical damage, and then 45% of that physical damage scales with elemental damage increases. And why is this important? I'm going to show you exactly why this is important. If you have stuff like Hatred, Hatred increases your damage by 24% of your physical damage. It basically adds 24% of your physical damage as additional cold damage. And I'm also using added fire damage. Added fire damage grants 37% of physical damage added as fire damage. And if I combine all of these three, added fire damage plus Hatred plus Black Gleam, I basically convert all of my physical damage to additional elemental damage, or in case of Black Gleam, I just convert it to fire damage. And that way I can scale my damage twice. Once by physical damage increase nodes, and once by elemental damage increase nodes. And why this is so important, I'm going to demonstrate on the tree. As I already told you, there are some skill points that are much more effective than other skill points, like Iron Grip. But this is also the case for points that are granting a lot less increased physical damage per point. Something like this one, or this one. This one gives 4% increased physical damage with bows, and this one gives 8%, and if you compare it with something like this, it grants less for the same amount of skill point investments. If you invest 1 point in this one, you get less damage than if you invest it in this point, because, as I told you, I convert almost all of my damage to elemental damage without actually making it so that my physical damage isn't increased by physical damage nodes first. And that way I can skill more effective skill points in this tree. I can skill stuff like weapon elemental damage by 10%, 10%, 30%, or even stuff like this, 10% increased elemental damage and 10 intelligence, or stuff like this, 10% increased elemental resistances and 10% increased elemental damage. These points give much more of a benefit for a single point than stuff like this over here. This one gives only 8% and nothing else. These over here give more percentage damage increase, and some of them even give even more than that. And if you convert your damage from physical to elemental, your damage is increased by only physical damage nodes, and that's why you want to focus on nodes that give quite a lot of physical damage for single points or 3 to 5 points. And then you want to focus on the more effective elemental damage nodes on the tree, because all of your damage is already converted to elemental damage. And that way you can make your damage scale up twice by relatively efficient skill points instead of relatively inefficient skill points. And that's how you want to build your character, especially if you are using a physical damage bow. You want to use Black Gleam, because if you're using Black Gleam you can focus on elemental damage nodes that are much more efficient. And there's one more thing you want to take into account. These nodes over here are not just better than this one by 2%, they are actually much better than that, because I'm using weapon elemental damage. This support gem gives 78% more weapon elemental damage, and more means it is multiplicative to other elemental damage increases. And this means that the skill points over here are scaled up quite a lot by this support gem. And that way they don't give 10% increased elemental damage, but about 18% increased elemental damage when you compare it to something like this. And because of that, skilling these nodes is much more efficient than skilling these nodes over here. And obviously skilling something like Catalyze or Celestial Walker is in a complete different league. And as you can see, if you're using a physical damage character, that doesn't necessarily mean that you should only focus on physical damage increase nodes. You have to mix it up in order to get the most out of your character. And if you have other characters, you also want to use the same principle. If it comes to increasing your damage, you want to mix up your damage in order to scale it up twice, or by other means like elemental damage and physical damage, and then you can choose the most efficient nodes in the tree instead of having to pick less efficient nodes. And that's basically it, guys. Keep that in mind when you're creating a character, and look at the support gems that are available to your gem and that are available to your build in the skill tree, and then try to maximize the damage on your character. And see you guys next time.